We're counting down the 15 forgotten British snacks you won't find in shops anymore, from melt-in-your-mouth chocolate bars that vanished overnight, to playground sweets and crispy treats that once filled every lunchbox. These lost classics tell the bittersweet story of Britain's golden snacking era. Each entry draws on nostalgia, unexpected reasons for disappearance, and the childhood rituals that made them unforgettable. Which cult favorite earned the top spot, and what snack time traditions have disappeared forever? Let's start the countdown with number 15, an airy chocolate bar so delicate it inspired one of Britain's first fan petitions. Number 15, the secret bar, offered a kind of chocolate magic that seemed almost too fragile for the real world. Wrapped in a swirl of teal and gold foil, it promised more than just sweetness. It was a test of luck and patience. Inside, a delicate lattice of milk chocolate hid a mousse-like center so light it threatened to collapse at the slightest touch. The bar's famous slogan, whispered in late-night TV adverts, "Can you keep a secret?" hinted at its cult status. But for all its mystique, the secret bar suffered a fate sealed not by taste, but by engineering. Many fans recall the heartbreak of finding their bar already shattered before it left the shop, the intricate chocolate web unable to survive a school bag or a crowded bus ride. Its fragility became legend, and by 2003, it quietly disappeared from shelves. Yet the longing never faded. Over 20,000 signatures have filled online petitions begging for its return, a testament to the quiet power of a snack that broke as easily as it bonded a generation together. Number 14, Vice Versa's, brought a playful twist to the sweet aisle in the early 1990s. Each bag promised a guessing game. Would you get a brown shell with white chocolate inside, or a white shell hiding milk chocolate? The fun was in the swap, inside out, back to front. A simple idea that made sharing a bag feel like a magic trick. Mars launched them in 1991, and for a while Vice Versa's were a lunchbox staple, their crisp shells and smooth centers a talking point in the playground. But behind the scenes, the recipe was under pressure. New European rules on cocoa butter content forced Mars to tweak the formula, making the white chocolate variant costly to produce. Reformulation meant the taste changed, and the novelty began to fade. By 2004, Vice Versa's quietly vanished from shelves, a casualty of regulation as much as fashion. No petition, no big farewell, just another sweet memory, undone not by lack of love, but by the fine print of international law. Number 13. Toffo was more than just a chewy toffee. It was a pocket money ritual, a fixture of childhood independence in the North and beyond. Each roll came wrapped in a shiny metallic tube, the kind you'd keep in your coat pocket until the paper wore thin and the sweets inside were fused by the warmth of your hand. Toffos were easy to share, hard to finish, and sticky enough to pull a filling loose if you weren't careful. For many, the Saturday morning walk to the corner shop wasn't complete without counting out spare change for a roll, then stretching the treat out through the week, one toffee at a time, sometimes swapped or saved for the bus ride home. But in 1985, all of that ended overnight. Nestlé's York factory, under orders to cut costs, shut down the Toffo line with barely a warning. 300 workers lost their jobs, and the sweet that had stuck to so many teeth vanished from shelves for good. The abruptness left a bitter taste, proof that even the most ordinary pleasures can disappear in a boardroom minute, leaving only the memory of that unmistakable chew. Number 12, Paces, brought a burst of minty freshness to the sweet aisle, wrapped in a promise of clean living and sporting energy. Each chew was white with 3 neat green stripes, softer than a polo, and just as cool on the tongue. The adverts went all in on fitness, joggers in tracksuits, kids leaping over hurdles, and the slogan, "Pacers, the clean, cool chew." It was the 1980s answer to health-conscious snacking, even if the only exercise most of us got was running to the corner shop. But as playground tastes turned towards fruitier, brighter sweets, Pacers began to lose ground. One former newsagent remembers, "We stopped getting them in regular deliveries in the late 80s, and by the mid-90s, hardly anyone asked for them." Sales that once ticked along at a steady clip dropped to a trickle. By 1995, Pacers had faded from the shelves, a quiet casualty of changing times. For those who remember, the taste is unmistakable, minty, chewy, and just a little bit out of step with the world that came next. Would you trade your cola bottles for one more bite of that striped chew? Number 11. Spangles were more than just sweets. They were playground currency, bright coins of sugar passed hand to hand in a ritual as old as the schoolyard itself. Each pack shimmered with see-through wrappers in a rainbow of colors, promising a fizzy burst of fruit or the sharp tang of cola. The thrill wasn't just in the eating, but in the swapping. One black currant for a strawberry, a whole pack if you were feeling generous or flush with pocket money. Spangles were the great equalizer, their value set not by adults, but by the secret rules of the playground. By the late 1980s, though, the rules changed. Mars, facing a crowded shelf and rising costs, began pruning its range, quietly axing the Spangles line in a wave of corporate rationalization. No grand announcement, just a slow, vanishing act. One day the packs were gone, and with them a whole language of barter and bright, sticky palms. For anyone who rode the school bus in the 70s or 80s, the memory of Spangles lingers. A taste of freedom, a glint of color, and the bittersweet lesson that even the most treasured treats can disappear without warning. Number 10. Cabana Bar was Britain's own taste of the tropics. No passport required, just a trip to the corner shop. Wrapped in a blue sleeve edged with cartoon palms, it promised sun, sand, and a sugar rush, even if the closest you got to a beach was the playground sandpit. Inside, a gooey trio, coconut, caramel, and a bold streak of cherry, all tucked under a layer of milk chocolate. It was sticky, sweet, and just a bit over the top, like a Blackpool holiday in bar form. The adverts leaned into the holiday fantasy, spoofing the banana boat song with a chorus of sunburnt Brits and plastic palm trees. For a moment, biting into a cabana meant escaping drizzle and homework, if only in your mind. But behind the scenes, the mood was less sunny. By the late 1990s, supermarkets were tightening the screws, demanding lower prices and higher margins. Nestlé, squeezed by rising sugar costs and tough negotiations with the big chains, quietly shelved Cabana in 1997. There was no grand farewell, just a silent vanishing act, leaving only the memory of coconut stuck in your teeth and that earworm jingle. Ask anyone who grew up in that era, and they'll tell you no other bar did escapism quite like Cabana, palm wrapper and all. Number 9. The 5 to 4 3 2 1 bar was a snack with ambitions as big as its name. Each bar was a countdown in layers: crisp wafer, sticky caramel, crunchy cereal, a dusting of crisped rice, all wrapped in a thick coat of chocolate. Unwrapping one felt like opening a miniature space rocket, and that was no accident. The adverts, pulsing with synths and cartoon rockets, drilled the jingle into your head. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off! Until even the quietest classroom could break into chorus at the sight of the wrapper. It wasn't just a bar, it was a whole event. Some kids even collected the toy tie-ins, swapping plastic rockets and stickers in the playground, hoping for the rare ones to complete their set. But behind the excitement, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 bar was fighting a battle most never saw. All those layers made it expensive to produce, with each extra step on the factory line adding to the cost. In the mid-1980s, As sugar prices rose and supermarkets demanded ever lower prices, the numbers stopped adding up. Production costs soared, and the bar's short-lived sales spike fizzled out. By 1986, it was quietly withdrawn, leaving only echoes of the jingle and a generation who still remember the thrill of biting through every layer. Ask anyone who grew up in that era, and they'll tell you, no other bar promised a countdown quite like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, even if the launch didn't last. In 8th place, the Texan bar was a test of patience and jaw power, wrapped in silver foil and stamped with a cartoon cowboy. Launched in 1973, it promised a chew so tough you could lose a filling before you finished. The adverts didn't shy away from the challenge. Each one boomed with the slogan, "A man's gotta chew what a man's gotta chew," as grizzled cowboys gnawed their way through bars that seemed to last forever. School kids dared each other to finish a Texan without giving up, and the bar's reputation grew until it was less a treat and more a badge of honor. But the fun came with a warning. In 1982, the British Dental Association took aim, accusing the Texan of encouraging potentially harmful behavior, a polite way of saying it was a dentist's nightmare. The backlash stuck. Parents began to think twice, and the macho image that once made the Texan famous now made it feel out of step with the times. By 1984, the bar was quietly withdrawn, leaving only the echo of its slogan and memories of aching jaws. Fans got a brief taste of nostalgia in 2005 when Texan returned for a single summer, but the world had moved on. Ask anyone who braved the original and they'll remember, no other bar demanded so much effort just to earn a taste of caramel and nougat. In the end, toughness was both its selling point and its undoing, a snack that chewed back. Number 7. Fish and chips. Crisps brought a taste of the chippy straight to the playground. No vinegar-soaked paper required. Each bag was a miniature homage to Britain's best-loved meal. Tiny crackers, some shaped like chunky chips, others like little fish, all dusted with a mild salt and vinegar tang that was just sharp enough to make you pucker. The real thrill was in the shapes. The chips were the ones everyone wanted, but the rare pink chip was playground gold, traded like currency between friends. Lunchboxes across the country rattled with these bite-sized snacks, their blue and white packaging styled after a classic fish and chip shop bag, complete with faux grease marks and a window to peer at your haul. The branding wasn't subtle. It leaned into nostalgia even then, promising a seaside treat with every handful. For a while, fish and chips crisps were everywhere. Corner shops, school canteens, tucked into picnic baskets on a bank holiday Monday. But the good times didn't last. By the mid-1990s, supermarket giants were squeezing shelf space, and newer, louder crisp brands pushed these gentle crackers to the margins. The last bags quietly disappeared, leaving only memories of salty fingers and the excitement of finding that elusive pink chip. Ask anyone who grew up in the era, and they'll tell you. Fish and chips crisps weren't just a snack. They were a lunchtime ritual, the taste of Friday night wrapped up for every day of the week. Number 6, the amazing raisin bar, tried to reinvent the rules of the sweet aisle with a health halo and a chewy bite. Wrapped in a glossy purple and gold sleeve, it looked every inch the treat, but the message was pure 1990s virtue. Raisins, real fruit, a snack you could feel good about. The adverts leaned in, not just candy, it's amazing, hoping to catch the eye of parents who wanted something a little less guilty for lunchboxes. Inside, you got a dense, taffy-like bar studded with plump raisins, sticky enough to glue your teeth together, but sweet enough to pass for a proper indulgence. For a brief moment, it worked. Supermarkets gave it a prime spot, and health-conscious mums felt a bit smug sliding one into a school bag. But the numbers behind the wrapper told a different story. By the early 1990s, sugar prices were jumping, and the cost of making a fruit-filled bar started to bite. At the same time, new cereal bars from global brands began muscling in, promising even more fiber and fewer calories. The amazing raisin bar, squeezed by rising costs and falling margins, quietly vanished from shelves in 1994. No big send-off, just a slow retreat as the health trend moved on and the economics stopped adding up. Ask anyone who remembers, and they'll recall the sticky chew, the sense of doing something good, and the lesson that sometimes even the best intentions can't survive a supermarket price war. Number 5, the Banjo bar, was the everyday hero of the wafer world, crisp, nutty, and always ready for a tea break. Wrapped in blue or gold foil, it promised a crunch that could go toe-to-toe with any Kit Kat, but with a twist. A layer of caramel and a generous scatter of chopped nuts, all tucked between light wafers and smothered in chocolate. The taste was simple, but the texture, crisp, then chewy, then smooth, set it apart. If Kit Kat was the safe bet, Banjo was the wild card, the bar you reached for when you fancied something with a bit more bite. For many, the Banjo bar's legacy is tied as much to its sound as its taste. The radio jingle, "Go Banjo for Banjo Bar," was impossible to shake, echoing through kitchens and car rides long after the wrapper had been binned. It wasn't just a snack. It was a soundtrack to after-school hunger, a staple in lunchboxes and glove compartments. At its peak, Banjo held its own against Blue Riband and Kit Kat, the classic wafer giants, carving out a loyal following who swore by its extra crunch and nutty finish. But the wafer wars were ruthless. By the late 1980s, supermarket shelves were shrinking, and manufacturers were forced to pick winners. Nestlé, looking to streamline its production lines and focus on bigger sellers, quietly dropped Banjo in 1988. No dramatic send-off, just a slow vanishing act as Kit Kat and Blue Riband expanded their presence, squeezing Banjo out of the picture. For those who remember, the loss still stings. A reminder that even the most ordinary pleasures can fall victim to the cold logic of the bottom line. Ask anyone who grew up with Banjo, and they'll tell you there's never been another bar that got the balance of crunch, caramel, and nostalgia quite so right. Number 4, KP Skydivers, brought a burst of playful energy to the crisp aisle in the mid-1980s. Each bag promised a tiny adventure, cheese-flavored corn snacks shaped like parachutists, complete with little arms and legs outstretched as if frozen mid-jump. The packaging was as bold as the idea. Foil bags in bright blue and red, stamped with a cartoon mascot leaping out of the sky. For a brief moment, skydivers soared. The adverts were everywhere, riding high on the era's obsession with space travel and daredevil stunts. Kids were urged to jump for skydivers on Saturday morning TV, and playgrounds echoed with the sound of foil bags being torn open in a rush to find the perfect parachute shape. But sometimes a snack's fate is decided by forces far beyond the lunchbox. In early 1986, a real-world tragedy sent shockwaves through the airwaves: the Challenger disaster. Suddenly, anything with a space or skydiving theme felt out of step. KP's marketing team, caught off guard, made the decision to pull the TV spots. Internal meeting notes from the period show a scramble to rethink the campaign, but the momentum was lost. Without the adverts, skydivers drifted from view, their shelf presence fading almost as quickly as it had appeared. By 1989, the last bags had vanished, leaving only the memory of cheese dust on fingers and the thrill of finding a perfectly molded parachutist in your packet. Ask anyone who grew up in that window, and they'll remember the rush of tearing into a bag, the disappointment when the mascot vanished from TV, and the sense that sometimes a snack can fall not because of taste or price, but because the world outside suddenly changed. KP skydivers became a casualty, not of flavor, but of timing, a reminder that even the most joyful treats can be grounded by events far beyond their control. Coming to the top 3, the Nutty bar was a playground legend. Chewy caramel, rolled in chopped peanuts, wrapped in a no-nonsense red and yellow sleeve that promised exactly what it delivered. The jingle was impossible to forget. Nutty. That's the name. That's the taste. It was a bar that wore its heart on its sleeve. Simple, sweet, and just a bit rugged around the edges. For a generation of kids, Nutty was more than a snack. It was a test of mettle. The caramel would stretch, the peanuts would crunch, and if you weren't careful, you'd end up with half the bar stuck to your jumper. But that was half the fun. Sticky hands, peanut shards in your lap, and the satisfaction of conquering a bar that didn't go down without a fight. But the Nutty bar's greatest strength became its undoing. As the 1990s rolled on, a quiet revolution was brewing in school corridors and lunchbox policies. Stories of peanut allergies, once rare, began to surface with alarming frequency. By the late 90s, schools across Britain started posting signs. No nuts allowed. Suddenly, the Nutty bar was unwelcome, not just in classrooms, but in entire communities. Manufacturers, faced with mounting pressure and new guidelines, had little choice. In 1996, the Nutty bar vanished from shelves, its absence explained not by lack of love, but by a new world where safety trumped nostalgia. Ask anyone who grew up before the bans, and they'll tell you, Nutty wasn't just a bar, it was a rite of passage. The taste lingers, but so does the lesson. How quickly a treat can go from everyday to forbidden, swept away by forces bigger than flavor or fun. As schools swapped out peanut bars for brightly colored fruit chews and allergy-safe snacks, the Nutty bar became a memory, a crunchy, caramel-coated casualty of changing times. Would you trade your fruit winder for one more bite of that nutty chew, or does the risk make the memory sweeter still? In second place, Rowntree's Tutti fruities stand as a rainbow-colored heartbreak, their absence still fresh enough to sting. Bright boxes, scattered across playgrounds and corner shop counters, promised a sugar-dusted burst of fruit with every chewy cube. There was a ritual to it, shaking the box, feeling the rattle, then tipping out a handful and sorting by color before the first bite. Each sweet, coated in a fine layer of crunchy sugar, offered a sharp tang that made your cheeks tingle, followed by a chew that seemed to last forever. For years, Tutti fruities were the unspoken currency of school trips and lunch breaks, swapped and shared until the box ran dry. If you were lucky, you'd find an extra red or purple at the bottom. Always the favorites, always fought over. The packaging was impossible to miss. Bold, almost garish, with every shade from lemon yellow to deep berry, making them a beacon among the monotone rows of mints and boiled sweets. Advertisers boasted, "Too fruity! Tutti fruities!" And for once, the slogan didn't oversell it. Ask anyone who grew up in the 80s or 90s, and they'll remember the taste, but also the feeling of tearing open a new box, of sneaking a few into class, of the sticky fingers and the bright, artificial joy that only a true playground classic could bring. Then, almost without warning, the end came. In 2019, Rowntree's announced a cull of their slower-selling lines, citing new sugar regulations and a shift towards healthier treats. Tutti fruities, after decades of faithful service, were struck from the shelves. The reaction was swift and loud. Nostalgia forums lit up, petitions circled, and grown adults mourned the loss of a sweet that had outlasted most childhood friendships. The pain is sharper for being recent. Unlike so many other vanished snacks, Tutti fruities were still there, right up until yesterday. Now the playgrounds are quieter, the lunchboxes a little less colorful, and a whole generation is left wondering why the brightest treats are always the first to go. And finally, In first place, Salt and Shake crisps capture the spirit of British snacking in its purest, most interactive form. For generations, these crisps weren't just a snack. They were a ritual, a tiny act of agency in a world of ready-salted sameness. Each blue paper packet held a handful of plain golden potato crisps, and tucked inside, a small blue sachet filled with salt. The magic was in the moment. Tear open the sachet, sprinkle as much or as little as you liked, fold the bag shut, and give it a vigorous shake. No two packets ever tasted quite the same. One day a dusting, the next a full-on salt blizzard, all decided by the hand that shook. This was more than just seasoning. In the lunch halls and on school trips, Salt and Shake was a shared performance. Hands hovered, sachets were traded, and the crunch that followed was as much about the process as the flavor. For many, the blue sachet became a kind of playground currency, sometimes saved up, sometimes swapped for a biscuit or a promise. The ritual turned a simple bag of crisps into an event, a talking point, a memory. Launched in the 1920s, Salt and Shake predated the era of mass-flavored crisps by decades. Back then, the idea of customizing your snack was novel. No cheese and onion, no smoky bacon, just potato and salt, as simple as it gets. But as the crisp aisle exploded with seasoned varieties in the 1980s and 90s, the old ritual began to feel out of step. Supermarkets wanted shelf space for ready-flavored brands promising bigger, bolder tastes. By the early 2000s, Salt and Shake faded from everyday view, surviving only as the occasional retro novelty, never quite recapturing its former glory. Yet, ask anyone who shook a bag on a school bus or in a chilly lunchroom, and they'll tell you, no crisp since has matched the feeling of control, the anticipation, the little blue sachet that made you the chef of your own snack. Salt and Shake wasn't just a flavor, it was a moment, a memory, and for many, the taste of childhood itself. Would you trade a dozen ready-salted for one more bag to shake? From the fragile secret bar at number 15 to the iconic Salt and Shake crisps at number 1, our countdown has revealed just how much Britain's snacking landscape has changed. Some snacks vanished due to shifting tastes or supermarket pressures, while others, like Vice Versa's and Nutty Bar, fell victim to new regulations and growing health concerns. The most surprising entries include KP Skydivers, which disappeared after a real-world event halted its advertising, and Rowntree's Tutti fruities, whose 2019 exit proved that even beloved favorites aren't safe from modern sugar rules. Across all 15 entries, a common thread emerges. These snacks weren't just treats, but cultural touchstones tied to lunchbox rituals, playground trades, and family memories. What made them qualify for this list wasn't just their disappearance, but the emotional imprint they left behind. Ultimately, these forgotten snacks remind us that food history is shaped as much by changing rules and economics as by nostalgia and taste. The story of British snacking is a story of community, innovation, and constant change, each lost flavor echoing a simpler, sweeter era.